Okay. You see the recording now as well?
I do.
Awesome. All right. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to this recorded discussion between me and Amy Eicher. My name is Christine Petrides, and I am a physiotherapist and an online pain coach. And I put out a call for my community asking if there was anybody who was interested in sharing their story and their journey of living with persistent pain. And Amy so graciously returned that call and has decided to join me today to tell me a little bit and tell us a little bit about her journey. So thank you so much, Amy, for joining us. And, the purpose of this is just to learn actually from you about your experience and what it's like to live with persistent pain and what some of the ups and downs of that journey look like. And, a bit more about the complexity of it, because I think that the healthcare professions, as well as the general public, don't always get a great idea about what it is really like to live with a long-term pain condition. So thanks again for coming, and I'm just really looking forward to hear from you. So maybe you can just start by just introducing yourself and telling us who you are.
Sure. My name is Amy Eicher, and I am an author of a book about my pain journey. And I, too, am also a chronic pain coach in the online space, just like
Mm-hmm.
you. I had pain for over 20 years and kind of figured it out after all the medical things had failed. And, like a good 18 years of physical therapy. Um, I was a very good patient, but it wasn't hitting the things that I needed as someone in pain. And I have been pain free for oh gosh, 8-9 years now.
Wow.
But I am now experiencing long COVID and have been kind of back in that chronic pain, chronic illness world for the last 8 months. And I remember a lot of the things that I hated about it.
Right. I can understand that. Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
not that there's a lot of things to enjoy about it, but there's things that you're like, yeah, yeah, well, whatever. And then there's things that you're like, oh, that's really worth getting angry about.
yes, definitely. Yeah, actually, that's also pretty interesting because probably there's also a lot of things like coming up from, kind of school skills you had to cultivate before
Yes.
coming up
Yes.
again. That's really
So
interesting.
So definitely the skills that I learned as someone in chronic pain, I am absolutely positively applying as, part of this long haul post-COVID, whatever we're calling ourselves, community. And
Yeah.
it has been eye-opening again, to see the number of people that have no clue how to interact in the medical space, having unknown conditions, right?
Yeah.
And having a majority of them be nervous system related, like we know chronic pain is. And
Right.
so it's being in those forums trying to, tease out like, okay, what seems reasonable? Who else is reading research? What's going on?
Mhm.
It's been eye opening to see how many people you're used to being able, and what happens when you are no longer able.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, that's so interesting. I would love to ask also like a bunch of questions about that.
I
But
was
yeah.
gonna say, let's just talk. You go
Yeah.
and we'll see where this leads.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess maybe a good place to start is also with your story and wherever that started for you, and
Sure.
yeah, how you came to have more chronic pain, persistent pain.
Pain. Sure. I was it was 1992, and I was a
Hmm.
new freshman. I live in the States. I'm in a little town called Normal, Illinois. It's literally as normal as you can get.
Right.
But a state university is here, and I came down here to swim and to learn to be a teacher. And within the first 3-4 months of practice, I started having a lot of back pain. And I said, hey, coach, back pain, weird, don't like it. And he was
Mm.
like, trainer, ice. And I was like, right, okay. You know, this is all very typical for college athletics, right?
Yeah.
So trainer, ice, fine. We have this gigantic 3-day long meet in 3 different places. We're on the bus, we're swimming, we're on the bus, we're swimming, we're in hotels. And like, wow, things are super, super, super tight. I'm a freshman on the traveling team, which is like a big deal, big,
Mm-hmm.
big deal. My age group coaches had kind of tagged me as, you know, hey, Aim, if you want, like you're good enough to train for Olympic trials. So like, if you wanna, you're kind of right there, girl. And I was like,
Wow.
I don't really believe that, but okay.
Mm-hmm.
So being the freshman on the traveling college team, you know, at a Division I school was a pretty big deal. And that 3-day weekend with all the transitions and stuff, like I came back and I was really feeling super, super tight and creaky and achy and all kinds of things. Somewhere after that, I hit a practice and I did a flip turn, one of the little somersault things where you like, well, back in the day, we flipped our hips kind of sideways and
Okay.
pushed off.
Okay.
So you could consider it a twisting, bending event
Hmm.
if we wanted to get technical for any physios out there that are listening to us. But I heard a pop, like it resonated through my body, and I was still, you know, like feet and head pointed towards
Right.
bottom of the pool, could not straighten my body out. So I'm not drowning by any stretch of the imagination, but I also can't unhinge in the middle. Like my
Right.
head can't straighten out. So the athletic trainer working for the swim team, this must have been their best day ever because something's finally happened. Right? So they're
Yeah.
like, oh my God. You know, they come, they like flop me on the pool deck, very unceremonious, very much like a fish out of water. And I remember them starting to stretch my hamstrings. I remember searing pain. And then my memory just kind of fades out.
Mm.
Over the next 3 to 6 months, I would see every doctor that like would take a patient, and everything comes back fine. My MRI is fine, my X-ray is fine, my CT scan's fine, my bone scan's fine. There's nothing findable on imaging. So for the very first time, I hear, well, it must be in your head.
Mm.
You just don't want to swim anymore, so you're making things up so you don't have to swim.
Wow.
Now, for those that are not in a sporting community, swimming is like, it was where my money for school was coming from. It was where all my friends were. We swam in the morning and the evening, and we had study group. Like everything revolved around swimming. Like no kidding. If I were like out on the weekend, not at practice, and like rain fell on me, you could smell the chlorine coming off of my pool. Like no exaggeration. Like swimming is like a cult. We're all crazy. Everybody's a little waterlogged, but it was my everything. I mean, it was my social time. It was my stress de-stressor. It was everything. It was also the way that I was avoiding going home to stay away from the man that had been sexually abusing me for a year and a half.
Right.
So swimming is very, very important to me. And the idea that I'm making up this back pain so that I don't have to swim doesn't make sense in any of the categories in which things like this may make sense, right? So
Yeah.
medically, I'm kind of fobbed off after 3-4 months, and there's no answers. I'm out of the water this whole time. The trainer, shout out to John Munn one more time because I love you, sir. But he is a young trainer, and like he's like, I know you're hurting. You walk across the campus like a 90-year-old woman with rheumatoid arthritis. Like, Amy, you can't. I'm not sitting through class. I'm laying on the ground with my feet up on a chair because I can't tolerate sitting for a 45-minute college class.
Yeah.
So through happenstance, I end up at, okay, we're like 2 hours from Chicago, which is that's the big city, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also, I grew up in the suburbs there, and a friend had gotten word that I had gotten injured down at college, got me in with a physical therapist that was, a little bit more knowledgeable.
Okay.
Not seen a physical therapist down here. We just stopped after all the scans.
Okay.
I go to this physical therapist, and she's the first person to actually touch me.
That's
She's the
interesting.
first person to ask my story
Mm-hmm.
and allows me to tell it without interruption.
Mm.
She puts hands on me, and again, remember, it's 1992. And she says, I know what's wrong with you. You've got sacroiliac joint dysfunction. Your pelvis is all wonky, and it's, rotated this way on the right and this way on the left, and in flare, out flare, woody, woody, woody. We're going to put it back in place with this muscle energy technique, and I'm gonna manipulate the bones of your pelvis, and we're gonna put it back in place, and you're gonna feel better, and it's gonna take a little bit, and then we got to strengthen your core. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm a Division I swimmer. I can hold a 3-minute plank.
Right.
I can deadlift more than I've ever been able, like more than it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous the amount that I can move. I can bench press more than my weight.
Yeah.
If I'm not strong enough to survive in my own body, God help this version of my body.
Yeah.
Right? But when you're in pain and all of the doctors have said, we don't know what's wrong with you, having someone that listened, having someone that touched me, having somebody that gave a name to my pain was like the heavens had opened up and dropped a savior in the middle of my world.
Yeah.
Right? So it took about 9 months, and I got betterish, and I was ready for discharge. When I was discharged, I was told this would be a problem for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I should watch for surgeries because currently, even back in 1992, the surgery was just sticking sacrum to ilium, and that's like your big hip bones that move, and then that bone at the bottom of your spine for those listening.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of bolt that together and go, well, you can't be hypermobile anymore because nothing's moving.
Right.
And she said, you want something that's going to repair the ligament damage, but your ligaments are damaged, and you should probably never have children because your body won't be able to tolerate a pregnancy. I was 19.
That's really heavy.
That's a lot. And so until I was 38, I would move and live in my life with the belief that my pelvis, that pain in that area meant my pelvis was getting looser. I did have 2 children, and the pregnancies were hard.
Okay. Yeah.
Towards the end, there was actually less pain than there was at the beginning. But then, my second pregnancy, when I had a toddler running around, that was pretty awful. I briefly mentioned that I was being sexually abused by someone.
Mm-hmm.
That person would end up getting arrested and going to jail. So that was sort of helpful.
Okay.
I got married, but I felt so broken, and I couldn't do the things other people my age could do. And there was just this constant fear that my pelvis was going to go out, that SI joint was going to go out, and I would need to find someone skilled enough to put it back in.
Mm-hmm.
If I couldn't do it myself. And so basically between 18 and 38, I would go through cycles where, be it my period, be it pregnancy, be it stress. I didn't recognize any of that at the time. I always thought it was, well, I moved wrong. I lifted too much. I shouldn't have done that. So I was constantly punishing myself for being in pain.
Right.
Turning down opportunities because they may cause pain.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was this great big life of an 18-year-old got shrunk down to this itty bitty teeny weeny circle of, well, I can do this, but I can't do that. Well, I can't sit that long. Well, I can't go to the movies. Well, I can't go out to dinner and go to the movies. Well, I can't, I can't stay at your house that long because I'm going to need my heat pack or my ice pack or my foam roller or, whatever the tool was at the time that I was using.
Mm-hmm.
I can only sit in this chair. I can't sit in that kind of chair. Right?
Yeah.
And everything became about placating my pain. Yeah. Nothing was about me as a person anymore. It was all about placating my pain.
Yeah. So sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that's just no way to live.
No, no, that sounds really hard, really
Mhm.
hard, and long and
Um,
drawn out. And it sounds like you had a lot of sort of rules for yourself in terms of what was allowed and what was not safe for you
yes.
to do with your condition, and that
Yes.
and that led you to doing less and less and less.
Less and less and less. And most of that was given to me along the way by PTs and doctors,
Right.
so it wasn't, I did make some of those rules up myself in
Mhm.
trying to manage flares, right? Because like you
Yeah.
become this forensic detective that's like,
Yeah.
well, I had a cup of coffee and then I ate an apple and then I bent over. So I
Yeah.
can't I can't do those three things in sequence anymore because that's really
Yeah.
bad for the body,
Yeah.
right? Or I
Yeah.
took my Tylenol 45 minutes later than I normally do. I've got to take that on time. So I can't do anything that's going to disrupt making sure I have food in my stomach so that I can take the Tylenol so that I don't end up in pain because of my SI joint being out.
Right. Yeah, that's exhausting.
It The amount of mental energy it takes to be in chronic pain, people simply don't realize. They
Yeah.
don't realize that every step is calculated. Like at some point, not everybody's like this from the beginning, but you get to a point where every step, every activity, every everything is calculated in terms of how much am I going to pay for this later?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that has to take up a ton of energy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the sad thing is it's not really correct. So
Yeah.
we torture ourselves thinking we're pacing and we're not, thinking we're grading our exposure or our exercise and we're not, but we think we are.
Mhm.
And so we stop listening to voices that don't talk just about the biology of things.
Right.
And what changed for me was I had gotten to the end of my rope. I was in bed 20 hours a day. I was up long enough to get my kids ready for school, get them off to school, get back in bed, greet them when they got home from school, attempt ish to make a meal, but like I couldn't stand for any significant amount of time. I couldn't sit for any significant amount of time. I wasn't sleeping
Mhm.
because who can sleep with all of that pain?
Mhm.
Worry and pressure and guilt, right?
Mhm.
Because like now I'm not the wife I want to be. I'm not the mom I want to be. I'm not the person. I'm not a person anymore.
Mhm.
I'm a bunch of rules
Yeah.
and pain. And I was seeing a physical therapist that I really, really trusted, which does make a gigantic difference to those
Mhm.
listening. Do not like your physical therapist, go find a new one.
Yeah. Was this the same one that gave you that first diagnosis?
No, this is
No.
this is 18, like 18, 16, 18 years down the line. So I'd
Okay.
been through plenty in 3 different states and
Mhm.
multiple counties within those states. I mean, I'd seen a ton of people. And the sad thing is towards the end, there was one that was like, I think that maybe we don't need to worry so much about your SI joint, but maybe there's other factors. And I was like, idiot, moron, no, because
Yeah.
300,000 people have confirmed it's my SI joint. You, sir, you are not listening to me and you must be wrong. And
Mhm.
physio in Maryland, I apologize. You were probably right. You actually probably could have helped me, but I fobbed you off because I did not know better.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's difficult, right? Like, why would you trust that one when you have so much more evidence for the other, right?
Yes,
It
yes.
makes total sense. And
So
yeah,
to our physios listening, sometimes directly confronting that belief that is wrong and
yeah,
is causing their pain, not always so helpful.
no,
Probably going to get you the
yeah.
like you enter the world of physios that don't know what they're doing, even though you do know what you're
Mhm.
doing,
Yeah, that's the tricky balance. That's
isn't it?
tricky.
Though.
Hmm.
So I ended up having surgery. So I have 3 screws on my left side and 2 screws on my right.
Okay.
And this was supposed to stop the extra pelvic movement that my ligaments were no longer doing their job because they were, I don't know. There was no, see, here's the part where I lose my brain. Like the logical part of my brain just kind of jumped ship because there's no evidence in any scan that my ligaments are not doing their job, except this is the story that I'm given for darn near 20 years.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And I did, at the surgeon's office, I did question that. And they were like, I mean, do you want the surgery or not? And I was like, I mean, I don't want to be in pain anymore. And they were like, okay, so this is your last option. And I was like, okay, it's my last. I mean, you know, what do you do? I mean, the day of my surgery, I completely lost every ounce of anything I'd ever had left. And I'm sobbing in pre-op, begging the surgeon and the physical therapist that was going to align my pelvis before surgery. That's a whole nother podcast. But I was so deep in that narrative and so deep in that story that, like, in order to feel safe having the surgery, I had to have a physical therapist align it. Because, dear God, what would happen? I mean, I felt pain all the time. So if it was aligned incorrectly and then screwed together, boy, that was, you know, I couldn't fathom that.
Right.
And like, for the briefest second, I allowed myself to hope that I could actually be out of pain. And all of the emotions of 18 years just came like pouring out of my face. And I was like, please just sedate me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, they said, well, it can take up to a year to heal from surgery. And I was like, I mean, it's different, but it's not different enough. And so 2 years post-op, I still had a lot of my original pain.
Okay.
And went, all right. My core is not as strong as it was in college, but it can't be a whole lot stronger. Like, I can do all of the exercises. So now the story is muscle imbalances. Well, your muscles are just imbalanced from being so, you know, for accommodating, you know, for your pain all these years.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mean, of course, after that surgery, there had to be another story, right?
Right. Because the loose pelvis story was no longer an option.
No.
But having the loose pelvis story solved for me was what made me go, all right, wait a minute. Muscle imbalance, like, this doesn't make sense because swimmers are stronger in the front and weaker in the back, and not all swimmers hurt. And like, I would, you know, baseball players are stronger on one side and weaker on the other, and it doesn't make their shoulders hurt like this constantly. Like, this doesn't make sense from the functioning of a human perspective. We're like, what, 13% stronger on our dominant side?
Yeah,
so
we are asymmetrical.
Right? So
all
why
of
does
us.
everybody hurt? And I was like, no, I'm not buying this. So basically kicked myself out of the medical system, and had some physio friends that had kind of found me and deemed me smart and started sending me papers about how we come to the conclusion that somebody has SI joint dysfunction. And let's just be polite and say the flaws with some of that logic. And that we just, you know, we can't really get there from a hands-on sensitivity perspective. And then that, yeah, those tests don't really test what we think they're testing. And I was like, all right, so all right, I will hang that story on the wall, but then what's the what then?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we took the nervous system dive, and this, you know, call it the safety or the sensitivity. Like, we can talk about this in a lot of different ways, but basically that my nervous system was what needed the attention, not the joint itself. And when I started paying attention to the nervous system and things that influenced my stress, my sleep, my feelings of safety, things got a lot better. And oddly, ditching the narcissistic ex-husband resolved a grand portion of my pain. Slowly going back to school and like actually grading life, not just a single activity, but grading my whole life. Also took a lot of load off my nervous system, becoming gentler with myself, not being so hard on myself if I did flare, and realizing, hey, that just means I like tried something new. It doesn't mean I failed at keeping myself safe
Yeah.
and flipping a lot of my internal narratives and what were the stories that I was telling myself and how was I going to create safety outside and inside,
Hmm.
because I realized my outside world had gotten a lot safer, but my inside world, it was very unsafe inside my head and my body with the things that I said to myself and the way that I approached pain.
Yeah.
And learning to address those differently was where the magic happened.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it sounds like you went from a very sort of strict or reduced sort of biomedical story or narrative explanation for your pain, and then once you begun to expand that, understanding of what else it could be, that was when you could start. I really like what you say there about grading your life as opposed to grading just the activity or the one thing. That's really beautiful, actually, because indeed that is what it is, right? Like um, we are trying to just expand life around pain, actually. And, we hope that it also becomes less. And a lot of the times it does, not always. But when we expand life around it, we have so much more relativity and so much more to play with in our
So much
lives.
to play with. Well,
Yeah.
and there's this transition where we, in the medical on the medical side of things, well, they, pain's their persona, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something I hear a ton on the medical side. And I did go back to school. I got basically, if you have assistants in Holland for physio, I'm
Hmm.
like I'm a baby physio
Okay.
is
Yeah.
what it is, right?
Okay.
So my kids needed to go to college, so I either needed to like just not do it or become a baby physio. So we call them PTA, physical therapist assistant is what we call
Yeah.
them in the States.
We have those in Canada. I know it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the time when I'm talking to my overseas friends, they're like,
Mm.
"What?
Yeah.
We're baby PTs. We're baby PTs." But what I realized in working with these patients in the clinic is that, like, okay, we're grading like this much of their world,
Mm.
but they're still moms and husbands and they still go to work 40 hours a week and they do all of these things. And so we can help them grade this tiny bit
Mhm.
is great, but when you see it in the frame of their whole life,
Yeah.
it's we're not doing enough. And then you think about this, well, pain has become their personality, right? All right, well, I have no hobbies, I have no activities, I don't leave my house, I Google and search the internet all day for solutions. So I'm not a prison to my pain, but it has become my interest and my hobby and the thing that I would like to fix so that I can go back, because it seems that medicine as a whole has decided until we fix it, we don't get to do those other things. If you're in pain, if you're sick, if you're chronically whatever, you, until you solve that, you don't get to live within your life.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's got to change.
Yeah.
That's got to change. COVID was so fantastic for so many people in chronic pain and with chronic illness, because all of a sudden concerts were online, and
Mm.
all of a sudden the world that they were very well familiar with of being social through media or Zoom and coming together as patient groups, now the rest of the world had figured out,
Yeah.
right? And for
Mhm.
a moment when the world was shut down, a lot of the people in those limited capacities had hope that maybe they were going to get to live too.
Mm.
And then the world opened back up and all of the musicians and the stars and everybody stopped doing things online. And once again, that population is completely forgotten.
Yeah. Oh, it is hard, I think, to live so isolated and, yeah. I mean, what I'm curious about really is like, because, I think it's really amazing that you were able to sort of change your relationship with your pain, and actually that, you had the experience of getting out of your persistent pain. And it's really wonderful. I, you know, I'm so curious about what that, the sort of the sticky part about where that happens, because it's not like you had chronic pain for 20 years and then one day it was gone. There was a transition there somehow.
Yep,
And,
there was a long way.
like what was the first, can you remember what was the first sort of turning point or access point for you?
I can.
Yeah.
I can. So the PT that had been with me the longest, right? This last one, he's got his elbow in my butt on that piriformis because we're going to loosen that puppy up.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, okay. Anyway, his elbow's in my piriformis, as were many elbows for many decades, and we were just conversing. One of my favorite things about manual therapy is our ability to converse with our clients or be conversed with as a client.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what are you going to do now that you can?" And we had a rule, which was no crying in therapy, much like crying in baseball, which I broke because for the very first time, I realized I had enough capacity to think about tomorrow and not just today. And then I became completely terrified because what do you do when you haven't for so long?
Right.
And so really, yes, grading my life, realizing that pain was more than biology. Like those are like baby rocks in the cup. The big thing was realizing I get to be a person again. Like, who am I? What do I want? What excites me? What brings me joy? What is important to me? And who am I going to be now that I don't have to completely focus on my pain 100% of the time? And it was in the becoming. It was in the restoring. The name of my company in my book is Restoring Venus, and it's to the Venus de Milo because she's this amazing statue and like this, paragon of art and blah, 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 right? All that.
Yeah.
And like a big freaking earthquake comes, buries her for centuries, and like one day some guy's like, "Hey, we found something here." I mean, like it doesn't have arms, but this is pretty amazing. Like, does anyone know where her arms are? Right?
Yeah.
And I just love that this amazing, this amazing piece of art is rediscovered. It's not the same. It's a little broken. It's a little chipped. It's a lot dirty, right? But like, it's now a centerpiece in one of the most famous art museums in the world. And people still go to see her and her dimension and her depth and all of the things about her, right? Like just because she was buried for a couple hundred years didn't detract from her value.
Yeah.
And part of being in pain is that your value is taken away. I mean, the way that society values people, the way that most of our families value people is by what you can do. Not who you are, but what you can do. And when you can't do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then here's this statue that's so important in the art world. And like, she doesn't do anything. She just stands there. Like, hangs out in the middle of a room with, velvety ropes. Yes. And I love that she's not the same, but that she gets to be important. And I feel like that's where my story went, is that I'm not the same, but I got hurt at 18. Who the hell is the same at 48 as they are at 18?
Yeah. Good point.
Right? I hope we all grew. I hope we all changed.
Yeah.
Figured something out.
Yeah.
And we don't need to blame that on our pain or on our physical condition, right? Like time passes, we learn things, we interact with our worlds differently, and our pain can change us. But if we stop and really figure out who we are, it doesn't always have to.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I really like that. I love that, because indeed, like, this is also something I do talk about with clients a lot. It's like, because it is a little bit of, pain can is sort of, it's like an unraveling and a rebuilding,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
and indeed, if you were going to take a bike apart and try to put it all back together on your own, it would be different probably, and it wouldn't look quite exactly the same, and maybe feel also a little bit different when you're on it, but it could be just as good. It could be better, you know. Yeah, and it it'll still function.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think going through the long COVID, and my heart rate's all crazy, and my yeah, if the autonomic nervous system controls it, it's not working right now. And I realized, I did the hoping thing, right? Like medicine's gonna have an answer, and I like even in my own head, I'm like, oh, Amy, honey, like maybe don't do that. And I was like,
Mm,
no, they're gonna figure it out. It'll be fine. And then like 3 months in, I'm like, okay, I officially qualify as like chronic or long COVID or,
yeah.
damn it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so are you gonna like, well, you don't even have the brain power right now to surf the internet and figure stuff out like you did when you were in pain. So are you gonna waste your life hyper focusing on that? Or are you gonna take the snippets that you can find, apply those, and live within the life that you have right now? Right. And
Mhm.
post-exertional malaise is no joke.
No.
Like, dear physios, again, if you are listening and your folks are absolutely crumbling after seeing you, please look into chronic fatigue, myoencephalitis. Like,
Mm,
look into that stuff because we do not treat it the same way. Like,
yeah.
having lived it and embodied it, this is there's no words to describe it. It all sounds like tired.
Yeah.
But the after effects when I can't get out of, when I push too hard, to use not so helpful terms, I end up in bed for a week.
Yeah.
Like, there's no graded exposure on this baby. So, playing with heart rate pacing and working to stay within that. And the longer I do that and the more I rest, the bigger my envelope gets. And so then I've got a little bit more, right? And just like chronic pain, you go a little bit and then you find that new boundary. And then you're like, oh, that was too far,
Mhm.
right? And you kind of got to like shore it up, work it out, do the things, whatever your things are,
Yeah.
and then realize, okay, this is how this is the sticky of the getting better, right? That
Yeah.
getting better is not linear. It's sideways and backwards and somersaults and 3 steps forward and 18 steps back.
Yeah.
And that the amount that you're using your brain, the amount that you're interacting with people, the amount that you're working, the amount that you're working out, moving, or exercising, like all of those things count. And then if you're female and you still have a menstrual cycle, that counts too.
Mhm.
Like,
Definitely.
where you're at in your hormonal cycle is another part of load on the nervous system. And
Mm.
when we really take a look at that, and then how are you sleeping? And, are you binging on coffee and croissants because it gives us the dopamine we need that we don't have because we're not moving? Like,
Mhm.
all these things matter.
Yeah, for sure. Of
And you can't
course.
fix them all at the same time. Like, nobody can. So you're not failing. Nobody can fix all this at the same time. You pick one place on the circle and start there. And if that doesn't work, please remember you've got 4 billion other choices.
Mhm.
Just because
Yeah.
just because the doc can't figure it out doesn't mean Christine can't.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think that is also quite challenging, right? Because it does require quite a big tolerance for trial and error.
Yep. You got to get curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want your life back, you got to get curious.
That's tough. Yeah. It is tough.
Well, it takes an enormous amount of hope and
Yes. And
most
support, you
and
know.
support.
This is where we come in. Just plug that right in there. But
I don't know about you, but I know with my clients and with myself, like,
yeah.
asking me to believe in anything by the end of that journey was like, I can't afford it. Price is too high. Can't fail again.
Mm.
And finding that childlike curiosity. Well, what would happen if?
Mm-hmm.
That question became kind of like my lifeline. What would happen if?
Mm.
I don't know.
Only one way to find out.
Right. Gotta try it.
Yeah. Oh. And so it sounds like is it true that the majority of your healthcare experiences were doctors and physios?
There's DOs and chiropractors and some pain medicine, anesthesiology types.
Mm-hmm.
But not being listened to, being told I wasn't strong enough, being told it was in my head, being told they don't know what to do for me. Like, it didn't really matter who I saw. That was the
worst.
Well, and the physios were really, truly the most hopeful,
Mm.
but all of them were going to put my pelvis back in place and make me stronger. And everybody had their own take on that, strain, counter strain, muscle energy technique. Those were the two main ones I came across. But, everybody had a set of exercises that were going to cure it. And that never happened.
Hmm. So in the end, you said that there was a friend of yours that was sort of helping you challenge your beliefs. That was kind of how it came about.
Yes, I ended up. A couple physios kind of came into the patient group, and don't recommend. Highly obnoxious, and I got very mama bear for the other people in the group.
Mm. Which group was this? Sorry, this was.
Oh, this was a Facebook group for people in SMA, and so this physio.
I see.
Was challenging the beliefs of the people in the group, and most of the group were not having it, and it was a safe place to complain about the burdens, right? So I do think physios should go into back pain, neck pain, SI pain groups and just observe the conversations, because we're never, ever, ever going to say this stuff to you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter how much we like you. We're never going to tell you how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like how bad it is living, like the living portion. Yeah. We'll explain the pain, but we don't want to burden anyone with the weight of how much we can't do and how much that hurts us and the guilt and the shame that we feel.
Yeah.
And sometime our irritation with you, non-specific, Queen's.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you'll get a good handle on how not to explain pain science and what that looks like after the patient that has nodded leaves.
Yeah.
You'll get a really good taste to that.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful, and I think as professionals we do need to see that. Spend like a week or two, scroll through, and then just quietly exit.
Yeah.
After you get a sense, don't try to save everybody, but quietly exit. But yes, I ended up bantering with this therapist, and then kind of ended up grafting into some pain science groups with a bunch of different people on Facebook. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Whole other conversation. Yeah.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. And a friend and a friend of mine that was a physical therapist that also had SI joint pain had read Explain Pain by Butler and Mosley. And I read that, and I got so angry that I just threw it against the wall, because I was like, why the hell has nobody said this before ever?
Right.
And that book was really the first, like, wait, there's another way to explain this?
Right.
These pictures are creepy and I don't get it. But
yeah. Yeah. That's funny.
But okay. So and I'm not really hardcore anybody. Like, I'm yes behavior, and yes nervous system, and yes Sims, and yes, like, it's all the things.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned. everybody has a piece of their theory that is correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's never good to guruize anybody, particularly. And I do think that Mosley and Butler kind of have that status a little bit at the moment, but they also they have done a lot also for
They've done a
the
ton.
public, and that is often the access point for people to start thinking differently. So that definitely can't be underrated.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
And the same for Adrian Lau. Like he's done a
yeah.
ton of research, and it was underneath the two of them, and
Mm.
kind of explains it in a different way and has different thoughts on it. But it's they're all thoughts on the same thing, and that's pain's not as simple as tissue.
No.
And when we
No.
reduce it to joint no worky, muscle owie,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, we're missing we're missing like 90% of it. Like, yes, tissue owie, nerves irritated,
Mm.
disc icky, right?
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah, but like that's the stuff at the bottom of the cup. We're not like, unless you're having surgery, we're not changing that, and that may or may not change your pain, and
Yeah.
that's where your brain just explodes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. There's a whole other side of things. And yeah, sometimes I think we forget, maybe as healthcare professionals or coaches or whatever, people who have been reading and learning about these things for a longer time, a long time, you forget that, why would you think about any of these things if this wasn't your job or your interest or any of those things? And you go, of course you go to the doctor and you say, okay, that's what they say. Yeah, sure. And if I go to the
Right?
physio, yeah, that's what they say. Sure. I have
Well, who
no,
goes to
yeah,
physical therapy not in pain?
right.
Okay, dizzy and balanced. We'll leave
Yeah,
vestibular therapists alone, but still, it's disruptive. If
yeah,
some if something isn't disrupting your life, why would you seek help?
yeah, 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 it's true. And it is really important for the conversation to be expanded also for the public, but also for healthcare professionals, because we definitely don't do it enough. That's for sure.
Right?
And it, yeah.
It's not in their head. It's never in their head. The only reason it's in their head is because that's where their brain lives. So if their brain lived in their right bicep, it would be in the right bicep.
Yeah.
We don't hear that well
Yeah.
because the doctors before you said what my doctors said. It's in your head. You just don't want it. You don't want to swim anymore. So you're just making up a reason.
Yeah. That must have been horrible to hear something like that. Yeah.
Devastating.
Yeah.
18-year-old Olympic potential, and you think I don't want to do this?
Yeah. That's unbelievable.
Like, fail.
Wow. Yeah. No good.
No.
No. No.
Well, and
Oh.
I had to laugh. I met, I after the book came out, I met with that trainer. He was still at the college, and I've moved back to town, and so I wanted to see him and give him a copy and say, "You are one of the good ones in this.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, you made me believe that my pain was real, and it's like you and my GP and the last physical. Like you're
Mm.
one of like I can count on my hand the folks that
Mm.
didn't tell me I was crazy." And I said, "I have one question for you, though, John." And he was like, "Shoot." And I said, "You put the football players that could barely float, you put them in the water.
Right.
You put the soccer players in the water. You put the volleyball players in the water. You put the track people in the water. Why did you not put the fishy back in the water?" And he was like, I have thought about you for decades. I don't know why we didn't put you back in the water. But I am proud to say the college now has a sports psychologist to help athletes with career ending injuries because they realized we don't do so well
Mm. Well, that's good.
because you've had an identity taken away.
Yeah.
human beings don't do well when we don't have an identity,
No.
which is why we can't hang out with our friends anymore. We can't do our jobs anymore. So we become part of a community, healthy or unhealthy, that is also full of people like us. And we identify with them.
Yeah.
So medicine is right when they say you've taken on this identity, but they're also wrong in that what other choice is there?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're forgetting the social aspect of the biopsychosocial in that there's no place, there's no room.
Yeah.
There's no room to fit.
Yeah. Yeah. So much gets taken away, and you have to figure out somehow to survive, of course. Yeah, I mean, this is a huge discussion, of course, about how we deal with people with persistent pain in the sort of standard healthcare model, right? And it doesn't fit, right? Because it's not economical, it's not efficient, it doesn't make sense, it's messy, it confuses us, and it makes us uncomfortable. So we push it away.
Right? Well, and how do you get reimbursed for, hey, go take a pottery class with some friends?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Our physical therapy studio will be doing, Merlot and Masterpiece every Tuesday evening.
Yeah.
Low back pain.
Yeah, that would be an amazing physiotherapy practice.
Right? Wouldn't that be awesome? I want to go there.
Yeah.
Right? And then you've also got the physical therapist there that could be like, hey, why don't we adjust the way that you're sitting? Hey, why don't we look at the way you're, you've got arm and neck pain. Why don't we look at the way that you're holding the brush? And maybe we adjust that. Right. And then we could actually give alternatives, right? Here's an alternative choice you can make with your body, not because you're doing it wrong, but if that's causing you pain, then can we find a different posture? Can we find a different position?
Yeah.
And you'd actually be watching people do things in real time.
Yeah.
Crazy idea.
Crazy.
So,
just
whoever
crazy.
picks that idea up, let us know. We want
to. We want in on the Merlot and the painting night, especially.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'm conscious of time, so I wanna to let you go. But thank you so much for sharing your story. And I want to ask you just one more thing before you go.
Please do.
What if you could go back now and see your younger self, dealing with all those things that you were dealing with? What would you want her to know? What would you tell her now?
Gosh. I struggle with this question.
Okay.
I think if I could go back today, answer subject to change tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But today, I think I would say, Amy, it doesn't have to be this hard. Mm-hmm. I know you felt listened to by that physical therapist, and that's really good. But there's more. We gotta look at more. It's your pain goes a lot deeper than this joint.
Right.
And if I could stay with young Amy and help her hatch that out between, 18, 19, 20 instead of 38, 39, 40.
That would have been invaluable.
Yeah. It would have altered my life. Honestly, I don't know that I would be doing this.
True.
Right? I don't know that I would be doing this, which is why it's such a hard question for me to answer, because there is nothing that brings me more joy in this world than helping people in pain figure out how to live again, figure out who they are again.
It is a very rewarding job.
Isn't it? It's not easy. Y'all are hard.
Yeah.
No, it's I cannot think of anything that I would rather do. Shameless plug for my book.
Go ahead.
Restoring Venus by Amy Eicher on Amazon, available on Kindle or in hardback. Well, not hardback, but physical copy.
Yeah.
And It is the vomiting of my soul of all of the things that I felt. So if you're a physical therapist and you want to know more, this would be a great book study. You are welcome to reach out to me and ask me questions. I answer physios all the time when they're like, what do you mean when you said this?
Mm,
Right?
nice.
So I am happy to answer those questions as someone that experienced pain. And if you are in pain and you are feeling alone, first thing you need to do is you need to reach out to Christine. Then you need to buy my book and read it and realize you are not alone.
Mm.
You are not alone. If you wanted to throw your kids against the wall because they were making too much noise and it was making your pain worse, you're not alone.
No, no,
You're not.
indeed. And I think that that's a beautiful way to end this, because that's also the point of this, and that is ultimately what I wanted for people to get from this, is just to know that they're not alone. And, there are a lot of people who are suffering in isolation, and we need to bring that more to light. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for so much for sharing. I will definitely link your website and your book and everything whenever I post this. And that's it for today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy to do this with you.
Yes, thank you. I will just stop the recording now.